All right, everybody, it's time to Bible talk. And it's me, Pastor Paul, with you today. Glad you're here for the Bible talk today. And let me adjust my camera just a little bit because I think it's slinked down just a bit. And I want to be able to see you and see me. So glad you're with me today. I like to take the topics we're working on in my Deconstruction U class and expound on them a little bit in our Bible talk time. And so that's what I want to do with you today. Let me make sure I have all my notes and stuff ready to go here. And I'm going to talk about a hell of a topic today. We're going to talk about hell. And yeah, it's one of our favorites, isn't it? And here's the thing about hell. Hell is a very, very, very important theological construct for evangelicalism, because hell, if hell is real, and I would say hell, by hell I mean the evangelical belief of eternal conscious torment. That means forever in eternity. If a 6-year-old says damn just before they get run over by an 18-wheeler truck, that 16-year-old is going to spend the next 100 million years in a lake of fire, tormented, without any without any ability to interrelate with other beings, just on fire, in torment, forevermore. 100 million years will just be the beginning of that torment. That is the Christian belief, that the loving God that they serve, because he's just, will take that 16-year-old, or let's step it up a bit, the 16-year-old girl who feels she has zero ability to take care of a baby when she finds herself pregnant, and so she chooses to have an abortion. God will, with maybe a little bit of sadness, but really with just gusto, throw that 16-year-old girl into a lake of fire for all of eternity, to never stop ever again being in torment, being separated. That is the belief of hell. And that belief is very important to the Jenga tower, the shaky Jenga tower of evangelical beliefs, because it's what gives me permission to treat you like crap. It's what gives me permission to disdain people that have a different religious belief than me. It's what gives me permission to say a Muslim doesn't deserve the love of God. What gives me permission to say I'm better than that gay person. So hell is that eternal conscious torment hell is an extremely important theology to evangelicals, because without it, they have to start loving people. And that's why people get hella upset. Sorry, I'm switching to a different mic here, so sound may change a little bit. So it's a hell of an important construct to evangelical Christians, because I can treat you very poorly as long as I can couch it in the idea that I'm trying to save you from going to hell. And real quickly, just let me tell you, and this is not what the Bible Talk lesson is about today, but there are really 3 Christian beliefs in hell. Now, this is one thing I was never taught as a child of a pastor growing up in the Assemblies of God, evangelical, staunch belief system. I was never told that there were different ways Christians believed about hell. We were taught eternal conscious torment is the only thing in the Bible. And if you don't believe it, you're not a Christian. And it's a really horrid training and teaching, because A, it's not true. And B, again, it's used as a control mechanism. Like, if you don't obey your parents, even if they're abusive to you, you're going to be in eternal conscious torment. And it's a very important thing to protect the community narrative, which is above all the most important thing in evangelical circles. But you can really come to the conclusion that the Bible supports 3 different types of belief in hell. And yes, you can find passages in the Bible that make the idea that hell is a place where we're going for eternity to have weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that's called eternal conscious torment. Now, there is another Christian belief that you can be a Christian and believe this and support it with the Bible, and that's called soul annihilation. That's that your soul will cease to exist, that God is a consuming fire, and you'll be consumed. Every tear in heaven's going to be wiped away, so we're not going to have to sit there and be in heaven hearing the screams of people in hell for all of eternity. And then there is sort of the Christian universalist belief that, yes, there will be a judgment, but for all of eternity, there will be the chance for people to turn and enter the New Jerusalem, whose gates will never be closed. And it says all the nations will come into Jerusalem. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. Now, I've always been taught every knee shall bow, every tongue confess will be God like going, yeah, screw you. Now you know for sure I'm God and I'm real. So you're going to bow your knee to Jesus and confess that Jesus is Lord. So screw you. And I don't think that's who the God of heaven or the goodness of heaven is at all. And every knee shall bow, every tongue confess is the idea that this goodness is going to draw everybody together at the end of all of this story of the world. And so a lot of Christians would say, then there's the universalist of like everybody ends up in the same place. That doesn't necessarily come under Christian belief system. And so there are those. But I want to talk today about why one of the reasons that I fully reject the idea of eternal conscious torment. And just know that whenever hell is said in the New Testament, it doesn't necessarily mean a lake of fire of eternal conscious torment. There are actually 3 different words that we interpret as hell in the New Testament that meant very different things to the people of the first century. But I'm not going to go too deeply in that. We'll be discussing that in our deconstruction U groups this week. But what I do want to go into is one of the main reasons that I don't believe in eternal conscious torment is it simply doesn't fit the character of the God of heaven that Jesus came to display. Jesus said in the New Testament, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. If you've seen me, you know who God is. And sorry, hang on a second here. The idea of a God who would throw those 16-year-olds into a lake of fire for all of eternity simply doesn't fit the character of God displayed through Jesus in the Bible. And I believe also the Jesus of the Old Testament as well, which we'll talk about in our Bible talk today. And so I want to start off with a video that kind of gives an idea of how I see the true character of God. And this is one of my really old TikToks that I did a long time ago, as I'm still sort of celebrating my 1-year anniversary on TikTok. But this is a video that I did. And this is, I believe this describes the character of God.
Hell no, Lord, a modern day parable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got the wrong video there. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. Technology and me. Let me get the one that I want. And here it is. Sorry about that, guys. And now I'm looking to see if this is the one that I want. I pray that it is. Here we go. Nope, that's not it either. Hang with me 1 second. Dang it, dang it. Someday I'll have a producer for all of these and we'll have all of this down and ready to go. Okay, here we go. Many young men do. A young man went off to college and, like many young men do, lived a bit of a wild life and found himself behind in his studies until he was worried he was going to fail his history class and lose his scholarship and his college career. He decided to devise a story to play on his professor's sympathies to try to save his grade. On his trip over to the professor's office, he practiced his story over and over again and finally reached the door. Tentatively, he opened it and found the professor very excited to invite him in. As the young man started to try to tell his devious tale, the professor wouldn't even hear it. Young man, do you know the grade you're going to get in my class is going to be an A?
The young man was stunned. He said, but I didn't earn that grade. And the professor said, I believe by giving you an A, you will become the student I believe you can be. This is how God looks at us. He's taken away the penalty for our actions so that we can be the best we can be.
So that's my belief of the character of God. And this story, by the way, is a true story from my life. That I had a class that I thought I was going to fail, and I was making up a story to try to say, oh, this happened and caused me to fail. And the professor just looked at me and said, you know what? I'm going to give you an A. And I think you're going to become the student that I believe you can be. And sure enough, I never missed that class again the entire semester. And the problem with Christians is they believe, oh, if we do that, if we give somebody an A, they're going to run with it and they're going to be terrible. And the truth is some people may, but the story of God is I'm going to take away the penalty at the end of it. And I believe that is going to draw you to be better. As in Romans, it says the law produces sin. It doesn't get rid of sin. But the grace of God to say there is no penalty at the end will draw us to our better selves. And that's the way I look at the character of God. So let me show you that in the Bible today in our Bible talk. And so bless our time of sharing the word together. And I'm glad you're listening in today. And I'm just enjoying this time with you. I'm sorry, I get a little tense when I start having technical stuff. So I'm just letting myself relax from that. So we see in Luke 19, the story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and the tax collectors were considered the worst people in culture because the main thing for the people of Jesus, Jesus lineage, the Jewish people at this time in history was that they were oppressed by the Roman Empire. And so the Roman Empire had oppressed them. They had taken away a lot of things that were really important to them that they believed were important to God's plan on earth. And Rome would then tax them and make economic difficulty for them. And the tax collectors were Jewish people that the way they made their money is that they would then add their own fee on top of the collection of the taxes. Rome would say, here's the amount of tax you have to collect, tax collector. And then this Jewish person would go out and force everybody, including widows, and to pay the taxes for the Romans and their fee on top of it. So it was seen as usury. It was seen as them being traitors to their own people. And so the tax collectors and the Samaritans and the lepers, like those were the worst possible people in culture. And we see in Luke 19, Jesus sees Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and says, you know what? I'm coming to your house to have lunch. And to go to somebody's house was considered a huge place of honor. And for a rabbi to say, I'm coming to your house, as Jesus was this amazing thing that people were like stunned. Why would he go to that guy's house when he's a traitor and a horrible person? And Jesus goes to his house, and we see that this honor causes Zacchaeus. There's nothing in the text that says Zacchaeus was condemned by Jesus and then repented. It just Zacchaeus being honored by this rabbi and treated with honor says, you know what? I'm going to make things right. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make things right. And so that's what's happened as we come into then the story in Luke 19 called the parable of the 10 minas. And the amazing thing at the end of the Zacchaeus story is Jesus goes out and pronounces to these people that sozo, salvation has come to Zacchaeus' house because he is a son of Abraham. He declares he's not a traitor. He's one of you. And he's part of the lineage of Abraham and the deserver of the blessings of those. And he says this, for the Son came to seek and saved that which was lost. And then he goes into this parable of the minas. And so I'm just going to read it and then we'll chew on it a little bit. And so it says, as they heard these things. So it's important when we see a transitional phrase like that, we understand that what is happening here is Jesus has just declared this tax collector a son of Abraham, which is an affront to the nationalistic, make Israel great again people out there. They would be very disturbed by Jesus saying that. And so it says, as they heard these things, he starts to tell this story. So Jesus is building on the disruption he's just caused in the people around him. And now he's going to tell a story that's going to explain the point that he was just making when he called Zacchaeus a son of Abraham. And it says, as they heard these things, Jesus, proceeded to tell a parable because he was near to Jerusalem. So this group is headed into Jerusalem. We're told by Josephus, the Jewish historian, that there were about 2 million Jews in Jerusalem for Passover at that time. So Jerusalem is swelling, and there's been all these rumors going around that the Messiah that they've been waiting for all these years, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, is going to appear this year. It's almost like QAnon, like JFK Jr. is going to show up at Dealey Plaza. And everybody was hearing this rumor, and so they were coming to Jerusalem to see what would happen, as many would come anyway because it was Passover. So he's headed to Jerusalem, and it says he was near Jerusalem, and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was to appear immediately. So see, everybody's thinking, here he goes. Jesus is going to declare himself the Messiah. He's going to overthrow Rome and make Israel great again and put our religious system in charge of the civil law and civil government. Sound like any other religious system you may know about? He said, therefore, a nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and then return. Calling 10 of his servants or bondservants, he gave them 10 minas and said to them, engage in business until I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. When he returned, having received the kingdom, he ordered these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know what they had gained doing business. The first servant came to him, saying, Lord, your mina has made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good servant. Because you have been faithful in very little, you shall have authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, your mina has made 5 minas. And the master said to him, you are to be over 5 cities. And then another came, saying, Lord, here is your mina, which I kept laid away in a handkerchief. For I was afraid of you, because you are a severe man. You take what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow. And the master said to him, I will condemn you with your own words, you wicked servant. You knew that I was a severe man, taking what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank? And at my coming, I might have collected it with interest. And he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. And they said to him, Lord, he has 10 minas. And I tell you that everyone who has, more will be given. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. But as for these enemies of mine, who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me. So that's quite a tale that Jesus told. Zacchaeus is a son of Abraham. He's walking toward Jerusalem. The buzz is, here we go. Jesus is going to take over the government and put our religious system and our race in charge. And this is going to be amazing. You see, the heart of the culture was very much like the heart of the evangelical culture today. We're looking for a Messiah, even if it's a guy like Donald Trump, to put us in charge of culture and put our religion in charge so our country can be made great again, and therefore God's plan can exist on earth. You see how that deception comes into your mind, and you think weaving your religion and your patriotism, your nationalism together is in the interest of God. And again, Jesus is again and again saying, no, that's not the character of God. And I believe this story is displaying something about the character of God that tells me the idea of a 16-year-old getting thrown into a lake of fire for eternal damnation and eternal conscious torment is not even close to the character of what God is, or the essence of the goodness of heaven. So Jesus is telling this story with all of that as a backdrop, and he's talking about this nobleman going to receive a kingdom. And probably what was happening at that time, one of Herod's sons had recently gone to Rome to say, hey, I want to receive part of my dad's kingdom. And he had to get the approval of Rome to do that. And some of the religious people of the day had gone to Rome as well to say, no, we don't want this man to be our king. So Jesus is playing upon the current events here as well to make his point of his story about the nature of God. And so here's what he talks about with this idea of, also what he's probably playing on is the idea of, you guys think the kingdom of heaven is coming down today, and I'm trying to tell you, no, the kingdom of heaven is to be led by you now, not sometime in the future. And so he says, engage in business till I come. Then he has 10 servants, and he gives each of them a mina. Don't make the mistake here. He has 10 minas that he gives to 10 bondservants. So he gives each of them a mina and says, okay, go do business. Now, a mina was a lot of money. A mina was about 3 months' wages
for a basic laborer in the culture that day. So it's a good bit of money that Jesus is saying the master gives in the story here. And so while he's gone, these guys do the business. Then when the master comes back, he calls each of the servants and says, okay, what did you do with my money while I was gone? And the first one comes and says, I took your mina, I invested it, I did business, and now look, I have 10 minas. So it's 1,000% return on what he was given. And the interesting response of the master here is like, well done. You took this little mina I gave you, this money that's somewhat insignificant, and you produced 1,000% return on it. I'm going to give you authority over 10 cities. I'm going to give you authority over a whole lot more than just money, because your heart has proven to be faithful and good. Again, that's what I believe the character of God is. If you just take a little bit and do a little bit with what God sees as a little bit, the reward is, and by authority, I think it is that we get to start to influence goodness over a huge group of people. And then the second comes and says, you gave me a mina, here's 5 minas back. And he says, wow, 500% return. You are amazing. You get 5 cities. And then, and there were others, there were 10 of them, but we only see the story of 3 of them in the parable of Jesus here. And the third guy comes and he's the staunch guy. I'm the one that I'm going to follow the rules. And, those other guys were frivolous with their money. And I was afraid, God. So I was afraid, master, because I know what a mean guy you are. I kept mine wrapped in a handkerchief just to make sure you weren't left with nothing. I wanted to be the one to protect like the very basic for you. And I believe I think this is representative for Jesus. This was representative of that religious mindset of the day. Like, we're just going to hold on. We're not going to like help people and stuff. We're going to just hold on and try to hold on until the Messiah comes, because, God's a really severe, angry boss. And we have to try to placate that severe, angry boss. And so in the story, the master says, knowing that I'm a severe, angry man who reaps what I don't sow. Now, I want to show you something interesting of that. It says, you knew that I was a severe man, taking what I did not deposit, reaping, and what I did not sow. That's not a declaration of confirmation of what this servant thought of the master. There happens to be a question mark on the end of that sentence. And so let's say it more like this. You knew that I was a severe man, taking what I did not deposit, reaping, and what I did not sow? You knew this about me? And what I think he's saying is, those other guys didn't feel that way about me. They felt it was worth it to risk. They thought it was worth it to risk. And if they lost it, I was going to say, at least thanks for trying. But you see me as this severe man. And so you hunkered down. And you know what? Because you did that, I'm going to take even what you have and give it to the guy who had the biggest return. And everybody around him like, that's not fair. That's not fair. He has 10. Why are you taking from the guy that has nothing? And he says, because you didn't even try. And because you misjudged my character. So Jesus in this story is not affirming that God is severe and harsh and angry and to be feared to the point of, I'm just going to hunker down and try to keep that God happy. He's not affirming that story of God. He's saying, even if that really is your belief of God, you should have at least done something, and you did nothing. What he's saying to the Pharisees is, if God is who you think he is, you still shouldn't be doing what you're doing by putting the bondage of religion on people and intertwining your politics with that religion so that it creates a bondage on people that is beyond suffocating. But he's also saying by the story, didn't you just see what I did with Zacchaeus? I declared Zacchaeus a son of Abraham, even though he's been doing things wrong and one of the worst people in culture for a long time. I declared him a son of Abraham as a representative of God. Do you think there's a chance that you've misunderstood who God is? And that God is the good professor that takes away the penalty at the end, so we can start to come to ourselves like Zacchaeus and say, you know what? I'm going to make things right. around me because I want to be my best self because of this amazing goodness from heaven that has come to me. I'm going to be better to the people around me. But somebody who sees the character of God as being harsh and desiring to throw a 16-year-old girl who had felt she had no other choice but to end her pregnancy into an eternal lake of fire forever, if you see that God, then that's the God you're going to portray to yourself, and that's the God you're going to portray to others. And this is what I see as the danger of the eternal conscious torment belief system, is that it tells me the character of God is that he loves to punish people because he's just. And we miss that justice. Jesus tells parable after parable where justice is everybody getting the goodness of God, not just the good people who follow the rules. If you worship a harsh God that is a lover of punishment and meting out justice, and you see justice as break a rule, get punished for it, then you're going to portray that to yourself and heap shame on yourself. And out of that shame, you're going to heap shame onto others. You have to, because you want others to suffer the same crappy life you're suffering. And how do I know that's true? Because that's the life I've lived most of my life. I had shame heaped on me by my parents, by my religious system. Be good, be better, be better, be better. And I failed and I failed and I failed. And I saw God as this SOB taskmaster from heaven. And so I wanted other people to have to live under the bondage that I lived under. And I did it under the guise of I'm saving them from going to hell. And I don't think that's the character of God at all. And I don't think it's even the character of God displayed in the Old Testament. And there's a whole lot of things I could tell you about how I think a lot of the Old Testament was written by an ancient people, and things happen and they committed genocide. And then they're like, God told us to do it. Just like we do in the world today. God told us to kill those people in the Middle East because we're God's people. It's okay who we kill. Somebody kills one of us, we're going to lose our shit about it. But boy, if we kill somebody, it's okay because we're God's people. But this is who God was, even in the Old Testament, the God I'm telling of, the professor who gives an A for the undeserving student so that the undeserving student can become the student that the professor believes he can be. And we see this in Exodus 19, where the Israelites have left slavery in Egypt and they're traveling out, cross the Red Sea, which, by the way, is impossible in the pathway of where they're going. They didn't cross the Red Sea because it's not even in the path of where they traveled. So, just so you know something about the Bible with that. But they come to Sinai. And I think this is a seminal moment in history of why the Old Testament is the way that it is. Because at Sinai, what we see is a story here where God in heaven is making an offer to the people of Israel. In fact, he's not making an offer. He's just revealing what they're doing. He's like, okay, I brought you out here, and here's what we're going to do. And let me just read this passage from Exodus 19, verse 5. It says, now, therefore, if you will indeed obey, and obey is a word, it actually means heed, like hear. If you hear my voice and you walk in what I'm saying, it's not like, here's a command, follow it. He's saying, if you hear and heed what I'm saying, and keep my covenant, like come into my agreement with you like I had with Abraham. And I do a lot of sermons on that covenant of Abraham. If you hear my voice and keep that covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all people, for all the earth is mine. And verse 6, and you shall be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. At the end, he's saying, Moses, go tell them this. So what God is saying here is, hey, I brought you out for a special purpose. I made a special covenant with Abraham for a special purpose, and it's this. You're going to be a kingdom of priests. Now, this is a really significant thing he's saying, because what we know is the priests were like just this one little subset of their culture, and only they could be priests. And in all of the cultures around them, there would be people that would be, designated to be the priest to whatever God ruled that people. And for him to say, all of you are going to be priests was a radical thing. He's like, you're going to be this really cool group of people, and all of you are going to be priests, and you're going to go tell all of the world of my goodness for them. Now, again, this is a radical thing, because every group of people knew, like, we have our God, and there were many, many gods that were over the different peoples. And our God, if we do a child sacrifice for our God will help us defeat our enemies in war. If we do a certain dance or incantation, our God will make it rain so that our crops will grow and we'll be able to eat. That was the mindset of everybody in that ancient time. We're going to have a God, and he's going to be our God. And our God will then hopefully be more powerful than the God of our enemies, so that we can defeat them in war. And hopefully our God will be more powerful than the gods of nature, so that our crops will grow. And here comes the God of the Israelites now at Sinai saying, okay, we're going to change all of that. You're going to be a group of priests that are going to preach about me as the God above all other gods, as a God of goodness, that I don't want to kill your enemies. I want all mankind to be joined together in understanding and love for one another. And I'm going to do teachings like love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm going to tell things like, and your neighbor is that person you don't think that deserves God's goodness. It's why Jonah says in Jonah chapter 4, I don't want to live in this world, God, where you have mercy on my enemies. I want you to be a God like everybody else's God that kills my enemies for me. And so the Israelites hear this from God, and the Bible talks about there being thunder and lightning and scary noises, and the people become afraid. And what I think we're seeing written by an ancient people is they started to consider what God was telling them, and the weight of it began to hit them like, whoa, wait a second, you mean like we're going to have to trust those people that we hate over there, and we're going to have to love these people that we hate over here? We don't like this God. Is there anybody else up there that we can ring up? We want to have a God like their God, a God that hates the people that we hate, and a God that we can control and do the right incantation, the right prayer, the right worship dance, and God will then do what we want him to do. And of course, he'll be a him. And so the Israelites rejected God's proposal at Sinai. And so it's almost like this conversation is taking place, and then God says, do you understand what that means? You're rejecting the covenant I made with your father Abraham, and you want to start a new covenant here. It's called a vassal covenant or a suzerain covenant, where I'm the boss, you're the leaders. I'm the harsh master who reaps what I do not sow. That's the covenant you're choosing now. And they're like, yeah, and don't talk to us. You're scary. Talk to Moses, and Moses will tell us what's going on. And so God says, okay, fair enough. Let me show you what a good idea that is. Here's 600 rules you have to follow. And if you don't follow those rules, I'll open up holes in the ground and swallow you up. I'll put a plague on you. Like, bad things will happen if you don't follow my rules. And the Israelites are like, good, as long as we have a God we can control and try to get him to kill our enemies, we're good with that. They made a covenant with God that God says was a really bad covenant. And when we see in the New Testament Jesus saying, see that temple, not one stone is going to stand on another, he's saying, you're in that religious system because you don't understand the character of God, and you made a bad covenant. And I'm going to come and fulfill that covenant, because that's the covenant you and God agreed on. But once it's fulfilled, that covenant is going away forever. And you're going to get a God that takes away the penalty at the end of it all, so all of you can learn to love and live well in the kingdom of heaven on earth, and let it be on earth that it is in heaven. And evangelicalism says, nah, we'd rather have the harsh God that we can control with our prayer, and by trying to not sin and not be gay and not commit abortion and vote Republican. We want that God. And that God is saying, well, then you have to believe that I'm going to throw you into a lake of fire for eternal damnation. And they're like, yeah, we'll take that.
I believe evangelicalism has made the same agreement the Israelites did at Sinai, like the one mina guy in the parable of the minas. We want to see you as harsh. And we understand that means shame is going to be heaped on me daily, again and again and again. But that's okay, because then I'll get to heap shame onto others. And I'll get to dream about the day when they'll be in hell and I'll be in heaven. I'll get to say, in your face. And no evangelical would say that's my basic belief. But that's the story that we're telling. We believe God is harsh. And then in the parable, what does it say? Jesus said, I'm going to take even that from you and give it to those who see the Spirit of heaven as good. Jesus talked about this religious system of his day that I believe absolutely parallels the evangelical system of the day. And he says, when you have a system like that in place, it needs to be cut off at the roots and thrown in the fire. Cutting it off at the roots means it never will grow back ever again. That belief system will take the little bit they have and we'll give it to these other guys. If my people won't take care of the environment, I'll take their authority away and I'll give it to these environmentalists who don't worship the God of heaven at all. Because I need somebody to take care of the planet. And I think we're going to see in this next generation that the authority of evangelicalism is going to be taken and given to a people that evangelicals would say, God can't love those people because they don't see him as harsh. How can he love them? How can we even live in a world where God would have mercy on those people? I believe we believe in eternal conscious torment because we don't understand the character of God as displayed through the story of Jesus. I want to read one more thing to finish up with you here. And this is from my novel, Joseph Comes to Town. And Saul, the protagonist of the book, who is the right-wing megachurch pastor, who knows there's something wrong with his religious system, but knows that he's not allowed to think that. And so he tries to keep putting it out of his mind until the world collapses in on him and suddenly he has to deal with who he is. And so Joseph, the Jesus type character in my novel, tells Saul another version of the story of the parable of the minas. And so he then begins to have a talk with Saul about it. I'm just going to read a little bit of it here to finish up our time together. So he says, you see, Saul, you've totally missed the meaning of that story. Saul sniffed for a moment, feeling a bite from Joseph's reply. Then why don't you enlighten me to its true meaning? Saul's caustic response caused the young man to stop for a moment. Saul thought Joseph might respond negatively, but he continued with grace. The first worker represents someone who's come into full relationship with God. In this relationship, a person is empowered to do the work of God. Saul says, I think you repeated what I just said. No, your answer was about doing the work of God because you're a good worker. Joseph pushed back. Father, God's value is for people, not for fulfilling tasks. God wants us to do the work of our Christian life from our love for him and for people, not out of some duty. We can only work from God's love if we know God's love. Joseph leaned back in his seat, studying Saul for a moment. The first worker understood the boss's true character. The third worker did not. Joseph leaned in towards Saul. The third worker in the parable of the minas, Saul, is you and your belief system. Saul's eyes grew wide and his face darkened. Come on, Saul argued. You, Saul, don't understand the character of your boss, Joseph said, his look growing more somber. You think God is a harsh taskmaster, not a good father. But God can be harsh, Saul retorted. This caused Joseph to stop and look back toward the sanctuary and motion for Saul to follow him. And then they go look at a picture of the woman caught in adultery. And so Joseph asked, do you see a condemning God in that picture? And Saul says, well, I guess I don't see a harsh God. Saul was feeling his beliefs being chipped away as Joseph gently challenged him. Jesus is going to chase away her condemners, But didn't she sin? Asked Joseph. Shouldn't she be punished for those sins? Well, yes, she did sin, said Saul. Then why is God letting her get away with it? Joseph asked now, tilting his head slightly to the right as he seemed to ponder his own question. Well, he's not, said Saul. Jesus is going to tell her to go and sin no more. Yes, after putting his own life on the line for her, he's totally now forgiven her. Jesus said as he pivoted from the painting to Saul and raised his finger to make his point. That's your harsh God. Not only does he forgive, as he did this woman, but he puts his life on the line in place of those who deserve punishment. That doesn't sound like a harsh God to me, Saul. Saul didn't answer. He looked back at the painting. As Saul looked at Jesus in the painting, he could see the artist had mastered painting depth into the eyes of Jesus. Saul, which group are you? Joseph asked, again gesturing to the portrait. Are you the rock throwers? Or are you with Jesus and giving the woman freedom to move on with her life without a religious beatdown? Saul crossed his arms, pivoted, and leaned against the wall next to the painting. I've been pretty harsh, I think, Saul said, looking down at the foyer's plush red carpet, like the men in the picture. Because your God is harsh, you have to be harsh to others, Joseph said. But because God is a generous and loving God, not a harsh one, the second worker in the story is someone in the world who's captured the Father's heart and is putting it into practice. Anyway, I could keep on reading. This is the point of what I'm saying. I don't believe in an eternal conscious punishment of hell because I don't believe it's the major story of hell in the Bible. I think fire in the Bible is a purification, not a punishment. And that's why I believe we will go through a judgment of our acts in this body on this planet, but it will be for purification, not for eternal separation and punishment. But the main reason I don't believe in eternal conscious punishment is I don't think it fits the character of the God of heaven as displayed through the story of Jesus. And if I'm going to call myself a Christian, then I have to follow the story of Jesus Christ and act and look like Jesus Christ, not like something that was misinterpreted by the Israelites in the Old Testament. And Jesus said, that belief system, that thing's going to be cut off at the roots and thrown into the fire. And you're going to get to know a world where rules aren't written in stone so that they bring punishment, but rules are written in your heart and in your mind so that you learn to love each other well. I'm taking away the penalty at the end so you can be the best you can be in the middle of the story. I think the evangelical belief system of pray a sinner's prayer, get to go to heaven, now just try to be a little bit good in the midst of it all, but you're dirt and you were born into original sin, and so you really don't have a choice but to be terrible, is a terrible theology. And it creates the people we're seeing out there on January 6th and elsewhere around our culture today. Because we're serving a harsh God, we think that harsh God wants to overthrow government today. And so we're missing the story that John 3:17 says, God did not send Jesus into the world to condemn the world, but to sozo it. And sozo means to make it whole, body, mind, and soul, as it was at the beginning. I bless you to know that the God of heaven, the spirit of goodness with which we can interact on an ongoing basis, the divine over all the universe, is not a harsh taskmaster as seen by the third servant with the one mina, but is actually this amazing spirit of goodness. In Hebrews 12, it says, everything that can be shaken will be shaken, and what's of heaven will remain, and what's of earth will be shaken off, because our God is a consuming fire. That at the end of it all, what we have learned and strained for, that is in the business of the goodness of heaven, is going to be rewarded with, wow, you're amazing. And everything we did that didn't measure up to that vision of us is going to be consumed by this purifying fire of the goodness of heaven and leave us perfect for what we've brought into the kingdom. And so therefore we should be about advancing the goodness and the message of the goodness of heaven rather than trying to met out the punishment of heaven. And I believe the gamble of it all is if we start to understand our potential for partnering with that goodness of heaven, we will do amazing things to change the world around us. And when I say us, I mean you. You have unlimited potential to partner with heaven if you're coming through the tradition of the story of Jesus or whatever your tradition of connecting to that goodness is. And when you connect into that goodness, you can change the world to be a better place. And that's the call, not to tell people they're going to hell, but to tell people that heaven and the goodness of heaven come to earth as Jesus prayed that it be on earth as it is in heaven, can change everything for the better. And my book is all about when that transformation comes, we become transformative beings for the world around us. Bless this word to us, goodness of heaven, so that we can live it and know it. Amen. I want to give you a chance to join in supporting the work we do through my work as Pastor Paul. You can give in financially. I don't take up tithes and offerings and all of those things. If you just say, hey, I love what you do, Pastor Paul, through the nonpartisan evangelical, through the unconventional, through the pursuit of the unconventional spiritual life, you can give. There's my Venmo account. You can give a one-time gift through Venmo, or there's the QR code for my Patreon account. Or if you want to, you can go in my bio and the link tree in my bio on YouTube and TikTok, and it'll give you information of how to get there. If you join our Patreon community for as little as $5.99 a month, you get some exclusive stuff and some cool things for being part of the Patreon community. And I would love it if you help. So bless you as you consider this, and just help this message of God not being mad at you, of God being the good professor speaking to the world around us so that we can change the world for the better, because that's the call of what we do. Thanks for joining me for the Bible Talk today. And if anybody wants, I'll be glad to answer a few questions or hang out with you guys for just a little bit. And let's see, I've seen some of you guys commenting. Good morning, random New Mexico thoughts. You say, I wrestle with that scenario every day. Christina says, ouch, makes a lot of sense. It is so hard to unlearn everything that's been ingrained to me more than half my life. And Christina says the same. Yeah, we've been told that we're dirt, that nothing good can come from us over and over and over again, and then are stunned when nothing good comes from us, when in fact, the message from the very beginning was God saying, here's a covenant I have with you, that I'm going to take away the penalty. The penalty will be on the goodness of heaven. That was the covenant that God made with Abraham. And now he's offering that covenant, not just for Abraham and his family, but for all of this group of people to be a priest for heaven. And they get to deliver this amazing message of goodness to the whole world around them. But because their mindset was so set in their religious and racial and nationalistic beliefs, they couldn't see any other way. And they're like, no, we want to have our God who hates them. We don't want you to love them. We want you to hate them. And God said, well, then that means our relationship has to change. So the thing is, that's amazing, is when we have grace for others around us, we're creating space for grace for ourselves. And in the coaching work that I do, in the deconstruction group work I do, in my own life, I've seen that I was taught to not have grace for myself. And so I have zero capacity for grace and empathy for myself. I'm trying to learn to live differently. And when I have a lack of capacity for grace and empathy for myself, it impacts my ability to have relationship with others that is serving and loving. And I think salvation, sozo, from John 3:17 is, I'm going to give you capacity to love like you never imagined you could love if you walk in the story of the goodness of heaven. That's an incredible message, and we've so perverted it into a list of rules and a legalistic belief system, and the idea that you have to be a part of a political belief system and a religious belief system to try to make God happy and make God's plan exist on earth. Man, the story of Jesus is too good of a story, too amazing for human beings, and too amazing for helping human beings to love each other and serve each other well, for us to wrap it in this other crap. Don't you think? All right, I love you guys for hanging out with me today. And those of you who are watching this on recording, you are amazing. Love you all and look forward to seeing you during the week. Don't forget, we have our spiritual mindfulness moment on Wednesday morning. Our new podcast comes out on Thursdays, and then next week's Bible talk on Saturday. Tomorrow, Sunday morning, is our Sunday community time, where we come together, take communion together, serve life together, and love one another in all of it. We'll see you at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can join us in the Zoom room or watch the stream on YouTube or TikTok. Love you all. We'll talk to you soon.